So the Iron Age idol that we are here to talk about today is the object from Gortnacrannagh that has captured most people's imagination and attention, and rightfully so. However, there are, as Eve has said, several other artefacts of particular note from the surrounding site and area. Some of these are earlier and some later, but they all contribute to the significance of the location and therefore the context of the idol. The one I want to talk to you about today is an early Bronze Age jet bead. And in the course of my talk, I will explain my fairly evocative title, Black Gold. On the morning of July 1st, 2020, while walking eastward from the N61 to Gortnacrannagh 7 to visit Eve, I was looking at the disturbed topsoil of backfilled test trenches. After rain and a bit of weathering, such finds such as lithics often come to light, and there are other sites of a prehistoric date dotted along the Gortnacrannagh ridgeline. At Gortnacrannagh 1, on the far side of the N61, Dr. Claire Mullins directed the excavation of several sub-rectangular structures that may well be of Middle Bronze Age date. At Gortnacrannagh 2, just on the far side of the N61, John Channing directed the excavation of an early medieval enclosure, which was built around an early medieval ring ditch in which several burials were found. And on the east side, or the Gortnacrannagh 7 side of the N61, he excavated a Middle Bronze Age ring ditch. The ridgeline was clearly inhabited and used for burial at various times during prehistory and the early medieval period. Anyway, on that morning, on the surface of a backfilled test trench, just around 200 metres from Gortnacrannagh 7, I spotted a small black and triangular object. At first glance, it looked like black plastic, perhaps an offcut of water pipe, but on closer inspection, it was evidently far older and much more interesting. This is the photo I took with my phone a moment after picking it up. You can see from the state of my hands that I was actually doing some physical work that week, unusually. Here are some better close-up photographs of the bead taken by John Channing. Firstly, you can see that it's not complete. From the image in the top left here, you can see how it is broken on both ends. And there is a particularly large piece broken off the bottom right-hand corner. In the wider end, in the bottom left-hand picture, you can see the remnants of two boreholes going directly into the face. Here and here. The remnants of another boring running at right angles from the first of those joins it to the broad face of the bead. Here. This is what's called an elbow boring. Using this technique avoided the difficulty of having to drill complex connecting true borings, but led to weak points, perhaps a factor that led to the first break in this bead. This occurs on numerous spacer plates, which this is and I'll come back to, but according to Alison Sheridan, the former curator of prehistory in the National Museum of Scotland and the former specialist on these beads, it is unusual on a terminal plate. Another more difficult to see boring is discernible on the narrow end of the bead here. As already mentioned, it is badly broken, and you can see from the ripples in its broken face how it is fractured conchoidally. But before we talk more about this specific find and its context, I want to take a step back and think about the material it is made of and some other similar finds. So what is jet and where does it come from? Our confused monkey is here for more than comedic effect. Jet is semi-mineralized wood, formed through compression, and this wood comes from trees we commonly know as monkey puzzle trees. Trees like these are now native to South America and Australia, like this example in a national park in Chile, but they are found widely in Irish and British gardens. Similar trees living around 180 million years ago under the area that was to become northeastern England decomposed and were compressed under land and sea and became jet. During prehistory, all British and Irish finds of jet come from this one place, Whitby on the northeast coast of England, around 500 kilometres from Gortnacrannagh as the crow flies. When polished, jet has a deep black lustrous sheen. In colour, it is considered the epitome of black, hence the phrase jet black. It is thermally very conductive and therefore warm to the touch after it has been handled. It is relatively easy to carve, but does fracture conchoidally, and when burnt it crackles and gives off a peaty aroma. A number of jet-like materials, such as oil-rich shale, lignite and canal coal, were also used to make jet-like artefacts. These are scientifically distinguishable, but it can be difficult to tell the difference by eye. The Gortnacrannagh bead has yet to be scientifically characterized, but it appears to be of genuine true jet, rather than a jet-like material. It is fractured conchoidally, and from the day I found it, I can confirm it remains warm to the touch. Jet from Whitby was exploited to make prestige objects in Britain since the Neolithic. In the early Bronze Age, it was used to make spacer plate bead necklaces, V-perforated buttons, and other objects. Having looked at our bead, you can tell it is from what is known as a spacer plate necklace, like this fantastic example from Killikieran in Scotland, now housed in the National Museum in Edinburgh. Early Bronze Age spacer plates are composed of spacer plate necklaces are composed of arrangements of triangular terminal beads and rectangular spacer beads, often decorated with geometric patterns, and interspersed by multiple strands of smaller fusiform beads. A complete necklace could contain around 107 beads. One from Inchmarnock off Bute in southwest Scotland had 136 beads. Our bead appears to be a terminal plate like one of these here. In their most commonly reconstructed form, like this example, spacer plate necklaces present a design and ornament that some of you here might recognise, very similar to golden lunula and some amber necklaces of a broadly similar date. In this image, you can see the arm of a jet necklace on the left and an Irish type golden lunula on the right. The distribution of where these necklaces of different materials have been found is complementary and almost mutually exclusive, with gold lunulae mostly found in Ireland and the jet necklaces in northern Britain. Somewhat similar amber necklaces I mentioned earlier are found around the Wessex region, particularly in southern Britain. Gold lunulae are generally considered a little earlier in date, and the jet and amber examples are therefore considered skeuomorphs, or translations into other materials. The lack of secure dating for lunulae makes it difficult to be sure. However, as Alison Sheridan has pointed out, significantly, both gold lunulae and jet spacer plate necklaces have been found in Scotland, and a lunula was recently found in Yorkshire. So it is highly likely that the decision to replicate lunulae in jet was taken by people in northern Britain, possibly because gold lunulae were harder to come by there. How value is conceived is culturally specific, but in each of these cases, the jet, the gold and the amber, we can see that a material with a restricted source and distinctive material properties played an important role in the value ascribed to these objects. Jet was, in northern Britain, in the early Bronze Age, what gold was in Ireland, hence my title, Black Gold. While gold lunulae could hardly be called common, there are quite a few from Ireland, over 80, and as already mentioned, evidence for jet spacer plate necklaces is rare. Not including the Gortnacrannagh terminal plate, definitive components of spacer plate jet necklaces have only been found at 5 sites, and none previously west of the Shannon. Finds of multiple beads, including spacer plates or terminal plates representing full or partial necklaces, were made at Cumber, County Down, Resharkin, County Antrim, and Oldbridge, County Meath. Single spacer plates were found at Longstone, County Tipperary, and Derry Craw in County Down. These appear to have been removed from their parent necklaces and curated as separate objects. The fine circumstances of some of the necklaces and beads are unfortunately poorly recorded, especially of the 2 northern multi-bead finds. The Resharkin necklace came from a bog where it had apparently been deposited. The character of the find site of the Cumber necklace is unknown. All other finds appear to have come from burial contexts. The old bridge necklace came from a double cyst, alongside what is generally assumed to have been a young woman, and the other compartment of which contained a simple bowl tradition vessel, early Bronze Age in date. Clearly, it was a very partial necklace, missing certain elements and combining bits of other necklaces. The long stone spacer plate accompanied a cremation with a tripartite vase of the vase tradition and a razor, an object generally seen indicative of male identity. The Derry Cross spacer plate came from a cairn that also contained human bone, a sherd of a vase urn, and charcoal, some of which returned an early Bronze Age radiocarbon date. In Britain, spacer plate necklaces are most often found with burials, and where sex is determinable, these are exclusively female. Returning to our single bead at Gortnacrannagh. First, we should try and imagine the whole bead. The surviving borings on the broad end are around 2.5 millimeters wide and spaced a little further apart. Completing this pattern suggests it originally had 4 borings on this face. Evidently, this terminal plate would have allowed one string beyond which a catch would have been to combine to 4 strings. While we cannot reconstruct an entire necklace from a single bead, from other terminal plates that have increased from 1 to 4 strings, spacer plate necklaces could increase the spacer plates could increase that number to as many as 8 strings, not unlike the Killy-Carton necklace I showed earlier. We do not know if the Gortnacrannagh bead was deposited as part of a necklace or as a single bead. It was found in topsoil on the surface of a backfill test trench, as I mentioned earlier. A 20 by 20 metre cutting was stripped of topsoil around the find location, but no associated beads or features were found. The find location was on a south-facing hill slope, so perhaps it originated from higher up on the slope to the north, outside of the area of the future road take. It also seems most likely, given what we know about the find circumstances of the Northern British examples and the limited information from the Irish examples, that it came from a burial, perhaps of a female of some status. Through ancient DNA, we can now trace a person's genetic heritage, and through isotope analysis of their teeth and bones, we can establish where they grew up. It is a little frustrating that our Gortnacrannagh bead was found out of context. Isotope analysis of several women buried with jet in Scotland has shown that while some grew up locally, others had moved from further afield. And it seems likely that at least some of these moved through networks of elite marriage exchange. This reconstruction is of a woman found with a jet necklace in Inchmarnock, Bute, Scotland. The facial reconstruction is by Dr. Caroline Wilkinson. Putting a face to someone from the past like this can be controversial. However, it really allows us and other people to engage on a human level. Dr. Alison Sheridan carried out the analysis on these beads. Interestingly, it seems elements from several necklaces were combined to create this one, showing again how beads could be lost, broken, curated and recombined. Carlton Jones of NUI Galway and others have highlighted how the wider Roscommon area was somewhere during the early Bronze Age pottery traditions met, and significant amounts of metal must have passed through. Since the earliest Metal Ages, people in Ireland were drawn into these networks of exchange. From the work of Professor William O'Brien, we know that for the first few hundred years that metal was exploited during the Copper or Chalcolithic Age, almost all copper in Ireland was from Ross Island, near Killarney in County Kerry. And for hundreds of years after that, the southwest of Ireland continued to be a major source of copper. There was an early flourishing of metalwork in Scotland, and the dominant brokers in the exchange networks through which this metal passed likely profited. While we should avoid the modern connotations inherent in ideas of profit-driven trade, such advantageous positions in exchange networks would have allowed elites in these areas to have access to exotic goods and to have accrued status. Metal is not the only thing that would have passed through such networks. People also moved. Thinking of our early Bronze Age jet spacer plate necklace and the bead from Gortnacrannagh, Could they have come from the necks of elite women from northern Britain? Could this single bead we found out of context at Gortnacrannagh, could it be the remains of a larger collection of beads from the burial place of such a person? It certainly signals that people during the early Bronze Age in Gortnacrannagh engaged in networks and a vocabulary of the esteem far beyond their local horizons. It contributes to the suggestion that the find place of the Iron Age Gortnacrannagh idol was a significant location for thousands of years prior to its deposition. Thank you.